Hey everyone, have you ever stopped to think that truly being together goes far beyond what we physically touch? That moment, the instant the man becomes one with a woman, he crosses a threshold where the facade he shows the world meets the shadow he hides from himself. We spend our entire lives calling it passion, attraction, but the truth is far deeper, you see. Love only shows its face if he has the courage, the guts to stay. Take note, what a man feels in that nanosecond he surrenders is a psychological knot that most people don't even dream of untangling. Carl Jung's psychology is like a lighthouse that shines brightly in the darkness, showing that our hearts are not that simple. In that quietude, a storm of emotions resides, feelings that men swallow hard. They don't tell their partner, they don't share with friends, and sometimes they don't even realize it's there. Behind that calm face of everything is fine, there are truths that, if we know how to look, change everything we understand about connection, trust, and that magnetic pull, Jung used to say. And we live by this phrase that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will call the shots in your life and you will call the result fate. And there is no place where this saying fits better than in intimacy. For a man, making the journey inside a woman is not just fire. It's a ground zero where his social mask wrestles against insecurity. There the arcana of the psyche, the warrior, the magus, the child, rise up in arms, stirring up fragility, the dread of failure, and a longing that has no name. That's why physical surrender is a nest of contradictions, affection and withdrawal, momentum and silence, the coming and going that leaves us perplexed. In this deep dive, we will uncover 5 Jungian faces that explain what actually happens in the man's soul when he gives himself over. This isn't some self-help book or cheap dating trick, no. These are psychological keys that unlock why some men take off without a trace, why others cling like ivy, and how the woman can give him the heads up, responding with eagle eyes instead of confusion. By the end, you will have a brand new compass to navigate this sea. When we figure out the game, we don't need to chase or guess. We gain the freedom to love with serenity, compassion, and rock-solid firmness. If the shoe fits, or if it resonated in your heart, don't be shy. Go ahead and smash that like button and plunge into subscribing to the channel, because the knowledge that illuminates the mind is just beginning. Let's face head-on the first great truth, the one that turns the tables on his silence, his touch, and that hesitation in the heat of the moment. The collision of giants, the power that begs for comfort, the very first flash that lights up in a man's mind when he merges with a woman is a surge of strength mixed with a deep undercurrent of fragility. It is as if his entire life were crossed by 2 opposing bolts of lightning. On one hand, he feels crowned, validated in his masculine fiber, puffing out his chest with pride because someone opened the doors of their own body and deposited their trust in him. This moment rings the bell of what is most archaic within him, the hunter's drive to make his mark, to prove his potency, to stand as the giver of life. Period. On the other hand, this very instant leaves him fragile as glass, exposes his flesh, and fills him with a fear that chills him to the bone that he might not measure up to what she truly desires. And that's where the trouble starts, and confusion sets the stage for many women. They look at his confidence, his physical drive, the brute force of the male. But suddenly, out of nowhere, they notice a shadow of doubt in his eyes, a silence that doesn't fit, or that craving for reassurance that he can't quite put into words. He indirectly asks for validation, in the touch, in that bear hug that squeezes tighter than normal, or even isolating himself in his own corner. The question he carries in his gut is, am I good enough? Did I satisfy her? Will she still want my scent tomorrow? Make no mistake, this isn't childish whimpering. These are the secret ghosts that men send to the basement and never confess. Jungian psychology gives the clue and shows the reason for this Cold War. The persona, that armor of confidence he wears for the world, clashes head-on with the shadow, the hidden fear of inadequacy and getting the red card of rejection. In that boiling point, his archetypes jump into the arena. The lover feels on top of the world, triumphant for being the chosen one. The child trembles at the core, pleading for a cuddle and a word of command. The warrior stamps his foot and demands control, to show strength, even if inside the uncertainty is a thick wall. It is this internal back and forth that makes the encounter layered and at times an endless puzzle. Some guys put on a fake smile over this fear of falling short. They brag out loud about their performance, act dominant, or even go on a bender afterward. Pay attention, this isn't pure arrogance. It's a shield. They are trying to silence the cricket that whispers in their ear, "What if I failed her?" Other men, in contrast, leave the door open to pure fragility. They soften up. They stare into your eyes deeply. They beg for a closeness that goes beyond the physical friction. This is the guy who risks his skin to be truly seen. And precisely because of that, he can become a much more connected partner. That's where the woman gets confused. Why does he seem spaced out afterward? Or why does he suddenly hold me so tight? The key to the riddle lies in this tug-of-war between dominance and apprehension. If the shadow of fear tightens its grip, he may take a break, needing a safe space to repair the mask. If he feels your lap is safe, he comes closer, seeking the security that allows him to integrate vulnerability instead of sweeping it under the rug. Jung taught that what we resist insists on returning. If a man pretends not to see his own delicacy, it circles back and turns into criticism. He might point the finger at you, saying you are judgmental, when, in reality, it is his own internal inquisitor that is tormenting him. But if he swallows his pride and accepts both pride and apprehension, strength and lightness, he takes a step forward toward individuation, which is the path to wholeness in love. For the woman, grasping this vision is serious business. Many people think the man just wants a release. But the crux of the matter is that he is also seeking a certificate of worth. It's not just through kisses and cuddles, no, but through the feeling that you accept his strength and his way of being. If you throw away his fragility, he may close up. If you demand he be a bull all the time, he may collapse under the weight of expectation. But if you understand that his masculinity holds both grip and fear, momentum and doubt, you create the ground for an encounter that is both hot and, at the same time, psychologically safe. That's why the first layer is the essential point. The man feels like the bee's knees for being chosen, but shakes at the foundation with the fear of failing. The inner enemy, the revenge of inadequacy. If the first layer is the cocktail of power and vulnerability, the second is the insatiable search for validation. For many men, the act of surrendering is, without him realizing it, a trial by fire. It is the confirmation that he is worth the price, that he is the chosen one, and that his masculinity has hit the nail on the head and been approved. This moment can feel like a certificate that he belongs, that his presence matters, and that his fiber has been stamped in a way the world rarely offers. But that's where the poison lies. The paradox that Jung would rub in our faces. If his worth is hung only on the act itself, he will never close the deal. In these moments, the man turns into a detective, and his eyes don't look at his own performance, but at your reaction. The dance of your breathing, the sound of your surrender, the light in your eyes. All of this becomes a silent scoreboard to know if he passed the test. When your body truly relaxes, when your eyes become soft, he feels at home. But when you seem distant, lost in thought, or somewhat withdrawn, he may fall into a well, doubting his very shadow, terrified of having missed the mark in a test he invented in his own head. Jungian psychology draws the map to show that the majority of male desire is not a conscious choice, but rather a pull on the rope that comes from the unconscious. Sculpted by the archetypes, the man is chasing external approval because, deep inside, he fights a battle with the ghost of inadequacy. The lover groans for affirmation, the hero wants the trophy, while the shadow frowns and utters the gem, "You are not good for this." Your response, then, stops being just pleasure. It turns into a treacherous mirror that reflects his pride and apprehension. Look at the debate. Some swear up and down that a man's desire is just biology, pure law of nature. Jung told it straight that biology alone cannot explain this endless hunger for a certificate of worth. In the moment of truth, the man's inner conflicts rise to the surface. Is he a conqueror or a boy begging for an encore? A pillar of confidence or a beggar for comfort? If he only seeks validation there, he falls into a trap, chasing one partner after another, not out of pure lust, but out of an insatiable need to prove he's still in the game. Each encounter is a quick answer to the question, am I worthy? Which lasts only an instant before the fear circles back and starts haunting again. As Jung left the message, what stays in the dark rules us as if it were destiny. Until the man faces his ghost of inadequacy, no amount of sex will be able to silence him. For the woman, that's where things get tricky and turn into a headache. You might wonder why he suddenly focuses so much on your reactions, why he keeps staring at you looking for a sign, or why he withdraws if you stay quiet. The truth is, in that instant, he is not just looking for an orgasm, but seeking evidence that he is enough. Your breathing, your calming gaze, your moans, all of this turns into the receipt he is unknowingly begging for. But here's the thing, you don't have to be responsible for healing the shadow that lives within him. You cannot carry the weight of his self-worth on your shoulders. What you can do is understand this dynamic, respond authentically, and choose whether his thirst for validation is rooted in a genuine connection or in an unending hunger. Jung's perspective liberates us here. Wanting to be validated is natural as breathing, but when it becomes the only goal, it traps both partners in a cage. The encounter is not a performance to receive applause, but a ground where fragility meets the embrace of acceptance. When the man starts to rein in the shadow, to accept that he is strong and uncertain, he no longer needs every encounter to be a battle cry about his worth. He can rest in the connection instead of chasing a trophy. The second layer, then, teaches us a mass. Intimacy becomes dangerous when we reduce it to a simple test of value. But when it becomes a harbor for two souls, where validation blossoms naturally from complete presence, it has the power to turn both lives upside down. Have you ever noticed how much a man focuses on your reactions? And do you think he's truly seeking pleasure or the proof that he is worthy? Third, the siren's call, the chemistry that binds the soul since the dawn of time. Man has been painted as the wanderer who comes and goes. The ancient legends portray the man as the hunter who roams, but who always lands at the same fire, with the same woman, in that familiar embrace. In the Greek epics, the warrior crossed the world for a name, but missed terribly the comfort of Penelope. In ancient tribes, the rituals emphasized separation from women, but celebrated just as strongly the reunion, seeing it as the seed of renewal. These patterns show that even though the man may seem like a vagrant, there is something much deeper that pulls him back to a single bond. Modern science puts the magnifying glass and clears the fog on why. In the intimate moment, the man's body releases a flood of oxytocin and dopamine, the same chemical cocktails that bond the mother to the child and write the memory of comfort. These neurochemical exchanges scramble the boundaries between desire and emotion. They create the sensation of one flesh, the impression that for a split second, his limits disappear and he belongs completely to another. Even if the man swears up and down that the affair is casual, his nervous system tells the tale and remembers the body, the scent, the rhythm of the woman he has surrendered to. This memory is not just in the head, but etched in fire in his biology. Carl Jung would take the torch and go beyond, jumping the fence of biology to land in psychology and symbolism. For Jung, the intimate act is a symbolic fusion of opposite sides, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, mask and shadow. He insisted that the encounter carries a mythical weight because it represents the thirst of the psyche to return home, to wholeness. The man, in that trance, may not even realize it, but he is acting out an archetypal script. He is not just touching a woman, he is running into his anima, the feminine side of his soul that begs to be embraced. That's why the bond can feel like a hurricane, why he can feel expansion and at the same time the loss of control. Here lies the burning coal in Jungian thought. There are those who swear by all that is holy that the affair is just chemistry and instinct, a matter of hormones and evolution. Jung insisted that biology alone cannot account for the depth of the attachment, nor the way a single night can haunt a man for years on end. He pointed to the collective unconscious, where the archetypes of union and longing reside. In his view, the man's return to a woman is not just because of oxytocin, but because she lit a fuse in his unconscious, a memory of his own incompleteness and the promise of self-sufficiency through her. For many women, this lifts the veil on why the man insists on coming back, even when logic beeps that he should run away. He may not be calculating. He may not even understand himself. His body checkmated him and remembered her. Her unconscious stamped her as the spokeswoman of his anima. This can create a suffocating attachment, sometimes even turning into a spell. What seems like a trivial thing on the surface is, in Jung's dictionary, a monstrous psychic bond that pulls him towards the mirror of his own soul. But there's a pitfall at the edge. If the man mistakes this attachment for ownership, he may cling with tooth and nail, demanding that she be always nearby to maintain the illusion that he is whole. If he closes his eyes to it, pretending the attachment doesn't exist, he may scatter himself across many encounters, without understanding why the ghost of a single woman insists on staying. Jung would issue a warning. As long as the man doesn't face the deep meaning of this mixture, he will remain trapped, obsessed with holding on or restless in the hunt for what he already lost. For the woman, understanding this third layer is winning the game. If he keeps coming back, it may not be strategy or bad faith, but the simple fact that his nervous system and his unconscious tied a knot and bound themselves to you. You are not the therapist of his journey, but knowing this gives you a step back with wisdom. You can choose whether this bond turns into a firm ground for growth or whether it entangles the two of you in a vicious cycle of emotional addiction. The third layer, then, teaches a lesson. Intimacy is irreversible because the chemistry that binds the soul does not dissipate with daylight. The seesaw of destiny, the fear that shadows. Love, a middle-aged man, opening his heart in therapy, let this out. I swore it was just a pastime. I kept telling myself I could vanish into thin air without leaving a trace. But the moment I was with her, something burst open inside me. Afterward, I couldn't stop thinking, what if she forgets me? What if I was just another number? I felt a chill, and at the same time I realized that I liked her more than my plan dictated. His frankness removes the lid on a reality that many men send to the prison of silence. The encounter doesn't just ignite desire, but also a fierce fight between the dread of loss and the will to love. On the surface, men insist on saying that they can separate intimacy from the bond. They keep repeating that they can keep the atmosphere light, treat sex as something that happens without deep consequences. But Carl Jung would issue the alert that the unconscious does not follow logic. The act of surrendering is never just physical. It is also a magic gateway to the psyche. The man may enter thinking he is in control, but he quickly discovers that intimacy bypasses his defenses. What emerges is not simply pleasure, but love, which arrives unannounced and takes over. Fear is usually the first to arrive. There is the dread of failure, the anxiety that he didn't satisfy her or prove his worth. There is the fear of being forgettable, the bitter thought that she might walk away without having been truly touched, while he is left on the ground, consumed. There is the dread of comparison, the suspicion that she silently measures him against others and finds him lacking. Jung would call these fears the whispers of the shadow, the part of the soul that carries self-doubt, inadequacy, and shame. Intimacy shines a merciless spotlight into this chamber of torture, forcing him to face what he prefers to keep hidden. However, even if fear insists on staying, love quietly enters the picture. Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine side that exists in every man, which comes back to life when the body surrenders. The woman before him stops being just the partner. She turns into the mirror of his soul. That's why men who swear up and down that they don't want anything serious find themselves attached unexpectedly. The anima doesn't listen to logic or promises. It responds to resonance, and when it stirs, the bond feels undeniable. This sets up the paradox. The head commands to keep intimacy light and safe, but the unconscious speaks another language. Love resides here. The bond is formed. Your deepest desire is reflected. Intimacy tears down the walls he spent years building, exposing a tenderness he may not even know existed. He can hit the brakes, but he cannot fully escape it. For the woman, this helps to understand the schizophrenic behavior. One day he vanishes, doesn't answer, and pretends nothing happened. The next day he returns flying, hugging tighter than before. This is not cynicism. It is the tug-of-war between the shadow and the anima, between the fear of being forgotten and the love that refuses to remain hidden. The cost of ignoring this paradox can be heavy. The man who denies the love that awakens in intimacy may harden himself, treating closeness like a test of manhood instead of a field of connection. This spreads confusion and hurt, wounding both. But the man who admits his apprehension and even so throws himself into love begins the very process Jung called individuation. He learns to mix the shadow with reason, strength with tenderness. By doing so, he becomes capable not only of desire, but of devotion. Jung would leave the message: as long as men don't face this paradox, they remain prisoners of it. Fear convinces them to hide. Love threatens them with exposure. The two forces pull in opposite directions. But when they accept that fear and love arrive hand in hand, the encounter turns into something else. It stops being a test of masculinity and becomes a shortcut to wholeness. For the woman, understanding this ignites the flame of compassion. When the man pulls away after intimacy, it may not mean indifference, but overwhelm. When he clings, it may not mean lack of backbone, but the awakening of an attachment he didn't plan to feel. And when he seeks your embrace afterward, he is not looking for a performance encore, but for assurance that he was truly seen. Recognizing this truth is not a free pass for neglect, but it helps you see the humanity beneath his contradictions. He is not just torn between leaving and staying. He is torn between running from love and surrendering to it. Do you think love awakens there more often than men want to admit? And how does that change your understanding of his contradictions afterward? The soul sculptor, the presence that signs the identity throughout history, the weight of intimacy for man has changed its tune. In ancient societies, a man's worth was tied to conquest and lineage. His currency was measured by his ability to produce heirs or to prove his dominance. Intimacy in this context was seen as a duty, a transaction between force and survival. The emotional side rarely saw the light of day, and fragility was buried alive beneath the expectations of the crowd. The modern man, on the other hand, lives in a much more tangled web of identity. The act is no longer just about survival or status. It has become deeply linked to how he sees himself. The way he is received by the woman can be the line that confirms or shatters the image he has of himself. In Jung's alphabet, intimacy taps the persona, the mask he shows the world, and tests if it is aligned with the deeper self. A man may enter thinking he is the master of the universe, capable, strong, yet afterward finds himself asking, was I truly present? Did she see me as I wanted to be seen? This is where presence takes center stage. Jung constantly hammered the importance of consciousness, of being fully there in the moment. When the man is truly present during surrender, he doesn't just experience union with the other, but also a clearer reflection of himself. But presence is like a flower, fragile. It can be nurtured or turned to dust by the smallest signals from the woman afterward. A touch of gratitude, a calming embrace, or the simple act of staying close can stamp his identity, telling him that he is not only desired, but accepted. Conversely, indifference, distance, or a cold look wounds him to the core, igniting the fuse of the shadow of inadequacy and rejection. This duality is the reason why intimacy is never neutral. It heals or it leaves a mark. The man can leave the same encounter more whole or more shattered, all depending on how he experiences the presence of his partner after the fire fades. Jung would describe this as the meeting of archetypes. When the woman responds with affection, she embodies the nurturing side of the anima, helping him to absorb fragility into his self-concept. When she reacts with rejection, she brings the shadow to life, leaving him trapped in doubt and shame. The conflict between the past and the present becomes obvious here. In the past, the man would shrug off these inner tremors, labeling them as weakness. The culture of Stoicism gave the command, saying that sex was about performance and duty, not feeling. But the modern man, shaped by a world that changed the key, can no longer separate identity from emotion so easily. He might laugh it off, but deep down he knows. The way she reacted changes the lens of how he sees himself. This tension creates a doorway of danger and opportunity. If he builds his worth only on her reactions, he falls into the trap of dependency, chasing praise forever. If he ignores her presence altogether, he runs the risk of disconnecting, turning sex into an empty play instead of a transformative ritual. Jung's teaching points to the middle path. Wholeness is holding both truths, recognizing the effect of the partner and at the same time, grounding identity in one's own inner firmness. For the woman, this layer shows the extent of the power she holds. A small act of care afterward, a look of affection, or even silence in the right place carries a weight that goes far beyond the moment. It can solidify his confidence or shatter it. This doesn't mean the woman has to be his therapist, but it does mean that her presence matters. Intimacy doesn't end when bodies part. It continues to live in the psyche, shaping how he views himself and the bond. The fifth layer makes us realize that sex is never trivial at the level of the soul. It reshapes identity, it reshapes presence. And in this remodeling, the man gets closer to his true self or retreats deeper into the shadow. Jung would insist that this is the ultimate mission. Accept the mirror that the encounter shows you, face pride and doubt, and let presence and not performance dictate the meaning of love. Closing thoughts. The touch that illuminates the path to wholeness. Well, we've completed the journey through 5 hidden cracks in the masculine psyche. For a man, the act is not just physical, but a mirror where he collides with his shadow, his anima, and his deepest longings. Carl Jung left the message that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it dictates the rules in your life, and you call that fate. Intimacy is one of the main stages where this truth comes alive. It brings to light the man's strength and lightness, his thirst for approval and his dread of being dismissed, his capacity to love and his wall of resistance. Understanding this web is removing the blindfold. It is realizing that behind that confident demeanor resides a soul that is wrestling with its own contradictions. For the woman, this knowledge gives the key. It helps her see that when the man pulls away, it may not mean lack of care, but confusion in his head. When he clings, it may not mean lack of character, but the awakening of a bond he didn't plan for. And when he seeks your embrace afterward, he is not looking for a performance rerun, but for assurance that he was truly seen. For the man, embracing these truths is the starting point for freedom. Acknowledging fear without having to carry the blame, accepting that love arrives by surprise, and allowing intimacy to reshape his identity. This is the road of individuation, the journey to live whole and without masks. If this talk brought you some clarity, don't hold back, like the video, so it can reach further, and subscribe to the channel, so we can continue this frank and soulful conversation. Your support keeps the wheel turning and gives us strength to share more of Jung's insights. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send the link to them. In the next episode, we will dive deeper into archetypes, unveiling the timeless designs that shape attraction, love, and the collective unconscious. Until then, remember this: intimacy is not just what 2 bodies share. It is about how 2 souls awaken each other to the truth. I'm out!